We're great savers. We're probably good earners too. But what about givers? The FI community excels at building wealth, but often we're laser focused on accumulating it for ourselves. Is that fair? Does that make us selfish? I'm not sure. On one hand, taking care of yourself should be step one. Like the old adage goes, put on your own oxygen mask first before helping others. And I think there's a lot of validity to that. But here's the thing. We're not on a crashing plane. We have time to reach FI and help others along the way. That said, it's not always easy. Many of us in the community struggle to spend money on ourselves, let alone give it away. But generosity isn't just an act of kindness. It's also a powerful way to let go of a scarcity mindset and embrace abundance. When it comes to the question of when to give, I could probably make a mathematical and emotional case for giving now or later. But with the level of wealth you're likely going to build over your lifetime, I can almost guarantee you giving will become a part of your journey at some point. Whether you decide to start giving during your FI journey or wait until you've reached your goals, one thing's for sure. If you're part of the FI community, you are going to want to know the most optimal way to do it. My friend Spencer Reese from Military Money Manual has been figuring out how to do just that. In today's episode, Spencer and I dive into how charitable giving can reduce your taxes, what a donor-advised fund is and how you might use one, and how to find nonprofits that align with the causes that you care most about, and are making the biggest impact with the money given to them. This is a thoughtful discussion that left me excited to give more. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with the creator and host of Military Money Manual, Spencer Reese. Well, I'm excited to learn how to efficiently donate through tools like donor advised funds. But to start at the beginning, I feel like a lot of us in the FI community struggle to spend money on ourselves, let alone give money away to organizations or other people. How did you get personally comfortable with giving?
Yeah, that's really interesting because while I was on my FI journey, it wasn't until I reached that point, let's say over $1 million of net worth, where I felt like there was enough abundance in my life that I needed to start sharing it with others. I'd learned about the effective altruism movement early in kind of my journey, maybe like 2015, 2016. And essentially with the effective altruism movement, which got a really bad name after Sam Bankman-Fried from his crypto exchange, which I'm completely blanking on the name now, collapsed. He was a big proponent of effective altruism, and he was a huge bullshitter, right? Like it was all like his company was committing fraud. And so his association with effective altruism kind of doomed a lot of the movement. And that was kind of people's first exposure to effective altruism. But really all it is saying we should be giving in the most effective way possible, which if you think about it, makes a lot of sense, right? Like why, if I can give $1 to someone in Africa and it literally saves their life, or I can give $1 to someone in the United States and it marginally improves their life, shouldn't I give the $1 to the person in Africa? Like, does that person not have as much right to a good life or to even live as the person in the United States? And I look at this as like a systemic problem too, right? Like in the United States, well, I'll just take as an example because it's a very wealthy country. We have a lot of government assistance, right? There's not much of a social safety net, but there is a bit of a social safety net. In the poorest countries in the world, there's not even that, that safety net. There's a stat, Madagascar spends, I'm going to get the numbers wrong in detail, but the order of magnitude is going to be correct. So Madagascar spends $100 per citizen on government services. The state of Hawaii spends $10,000 a year on services. Just the state. That's not including federal. When you look at that scale, it's not that their life is 10% as bad. It's 1% or 0.1%, right? We're talking about 100x or 1,000x difference here between, and it's just simple things like, do you have good roads to drive on? Do you have a hospital that you can go to that is adequately supplied? So I completely forgot what your question was. Oh, it's okay. Giving on the road to financial independence.
Yes.
I didn't. I keep track, as most optimizers will, of our giving. And if I look at how much we gave while we were on the road to financial independence, it was $100 here, $100 there. There was no real system to it. There was no real goal to it. It was kind of ad hoc. It was whatever, there was some veterans organizations, which obviously are near and dear to my heart. There were some hot topics at the time, like I don't know if your listeners will remember, but there was like lands out in like South Dakota that were owned by Native Americans, and they were going to build like an oil pipeline through it. So we like, threw $100 at that to like help them out. But there was no real objective. There was no real goal. And in my mind, it was kind of like, okay, put my own oxygen mask on first, get to financial independence, and then we'll start supporting the organizations at a level that actually moves the needle. And that's the big thing for me, right? Like, if I'm giving $100 to the United Way, it just disappears, right? It just goes into a black box. And I don't know what the United Way does. I think they do stuff with kids in like the inner city, maybe. And so it was hard to find an organization that we knew that our dollar was going to do the most good. And it was really the exposure to Peter Singer and his book, The Life You Can Save. Peter Singer is a Australian ethics professor, and he wrote the book called The Life You Can Save. And essentially he argues that not only should we be giving, and he argues about 10% of your income would be a good goal to give, but we should be giving in the most effective, the most efficient way possible. And so like some of the organizations that he might support would be like vitamin A supplements for the third world, right? Or malaria nets, where, we've done studies, and for every $5,000 of anti-malaria nets that we purchase for this country, it reduces deaths by 1, right? So now it's like, great. So you can literally save a life. $5,000 equals one human life. You're not going to get that kind of return on investment in a first world country because we just don't have malaria, right? Like we are already we already have so much abundance. We have more people dying from obesity than we do from starvation. When to give on the journey to financial independence? It's a good question. I don't have a good answer. In my personal experience, I didn't in a very systemic way. Now, my podcast partner, Jamie, he comes from a more religiously informed background. And so they have the concept in Christianity, right, of tithing. I grew up Christian, and so it's familiar to me as well. But yeah, giving 10% of your income to the church or to charitable organizations. In Islam, they have the concept of zakat, which is 2.5% of your total wealth. It's not just your income, but it's based on how much wealth you have. In the Jewish tradition, they have a similar concept as well. If you come from one of those religious backgrounds, it might be more ingrained in you to give on the journey to financial independence. But I kind of took the approach of, I want to give at a level where it's actually making an impact, right? So I don't want to give $50 that buys 2 malaria nets. I want to give $5,000 that saves an entire person's life. And I'm going to be able to do that when I'm financially independent. Now, the danger there is you build a habit of you're only saving and investing for yourself. You reach financial independence and you don't start giving, right? You were never a generous person ever. And so you were just using it as an excuse to not give. I can see that argument, but one of the tools we'll talk about on this podcast today, the Donor Advised Fund, actually could be a way that you can kind of get around that initial reluctance I had of giving in onesie twosies and not really having a solid plan.
I would probably disagree with you on the amount and the impact, like waiting until you can make a significant amount to have the impact that you want. Of course, that's a personal opinion for you too. But I'm just thinking through my 24-year-old self. Maybe I was making 40 grand at the time, and I probably would have been pretty proud if I went ahead and wrote a check for $50 or $100 to an organization that I feel like is doing a lot of good. And kind of similar to what you were eventually getting to too, like starting to build the habit of generosity and prioritizing generosity, I think is important. But I think it's an interesting conundrum too of like the oxygen mask first analogy that you're talking about here. Could you be more effective by saving your money and building wealth and then deploying that when you have a substantial amount of wealth, at your point, $1 million? Or do you give on your journey or your path to becoming wealthy or becoming financially independent? I'm not sure if we have the right answer, and I think it might be a personal choice for everyone.
Yeah, looking back, I would say, if the tools such as like Daffy, which is a donor advised fund that we'll talk about. And we'll talk about what a donor advised fund is because I keep referring to it.
Yes.
Spoiler alert. But if those tools had existed earlier in my journey, maybe we would have said, look, like 10%'s a bit high for us, but we can do 1%, we can do 5%. And, it's hard as an optimizer because you're looking at every dollar and you're like, well, I could have, if I just invested this dollar in 7 years, it's going to be $2. But my argument against that, and there are people that are hungry today, right? There are people that are thirsty today. And so who are you to say, oh, just wait 7 years. I'll have more money in 7 years. Then I'll be able to help you. It's like, no, man, these people need help right now. They need help today. And if we're talking to someone who's, much later in their financial independence journey, like they have achieved financial independence or they're beyond financial independence and they're into that extreme abundance stage, if you're setting up a legacy plan and you're like, okay, when I die, like this, a quarter of my estate's going to go to charities. It's like, well, why not now? Why not today? And because yes, they'll take your money 20 years from now, but they could really use your money right now. So yeah, I think it's a tough call. Like, do you give along the way? If I was going back to my younger self, I would say yes, give along the way, even if it doesn't feel like you're making an impact, because it starts that habit. It's creating like the person that you want to become, right? So like the dollar amounts get bigger and bigger, but the percentage might actually just stay the same. But because you're a generous person, because you're a person that supports organizations that you believe in, you've been doing this. It's like anything, right? Like compounding returns come from these like small daily or monthly actions or annual actions that you take. And it's the same thing I think in charity and charitable giving is you have to put in the reps. Like you have to like give to a couple organizations. Like, did that organization send you a thank you card? Did that organization say, hey, this is how we used your money? Did that organization just follow up with a card the next Christmas saying, hey, can we get some more money? Like how are you treated as a customer? And did you feel like you made an impact? And I'll talk about some organizations like where we felt like we made an impact. But I think that's what I would tell my younger self is just give a little bit along the way. And it's not like, if you've set the systems in place to become financially independent, you're going to become financially independent, whether that's 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years from now. It's all just savings rate, right? It's just a mathematical equation. And so to not give along the way, I think is actually to deprive yourself of the joy of giving and the reps, the habit of giving, that eventually when you are financially independent and you're like, oh, I've got a much more substantial amount of wealth, I'm still, helping the causes that I want to help. I'm just helping them at a higher level now. And I've already kind of established those relationships at a lower level.
I almost see it in parallel when I'm having conversations and even my own financial independence journey of the incremental freedom that we get over time. Like the people that are head down, grinding it at work right now, absolutely hating these years as they're building towards financial independence. And then they reach financial independence and like, you know what? I wish I would have just maybe done something a little bit more enjoyable that paid me a little bit less, even if it would have taken me twice the amount of time. I almost see that parallel running the same with charitable giving. And it's like, I wish I would have given a little bit and been generous a little bit throughout my journey to financial independence, even if it means putting an extra year or two on my FI number. I think that's totally fine.
Yeah. It's a bit woo-woo, but I'm a firm believer that like when you give it away, it comes right back to you. And whether that's karma, whether that's just, the universe saying thank you. And like, you shouldn't give because you have that expectation. But what I have found is that the more we give away, the more that we get back. And not just from the organizations that we give to, but it just seems like more good things happen in our life the more we give away. And is that confirmation bias? Yes, absolutely. But it's a good confirmation bias. So I'll take it. Like for a lot of these things, it doesn't, it's almost like, is it real? It's like, well, it's as real as it is, right? Like this is what happened in my experience. It might not happen for you, but it happened for us, and try it. Like, and if you're a Scrooge McDuck and you don't want giving like your money away makes it painful for you, then maybe don't give. But the other point there is beginning to understand that like money is a flow of energy. When you take some piece of it and you carve it out and you say, I'm going to help out a brother or a sister who's less fortunate than me. That's what a good human does. I mean, that's what a good person does. There's a great story, Peter Singer's The Life You Can Save. And he talks about how you're on your way to work, you're wearing a great suit, You're wearing brand new shoes. Maybe it was like a $2,000 suit, $500 shoes. You're in Austin, right? And you're walking by the park, and there's a little pond there, and you often see kids playing there. And on this particular day, there's a child there, and they're drowning. They can't swim. They're out too far in the water. There's no parents nearby, and you look around, and there's no one around. Like, people are coming, but like they're pretty far away. And so what do, right? Do you jump in and ruin your brand new $2,000 suit, your $500 shoes? Well, of course, right? Like no one would hesitate for a second. Only a psychopath would hesitate for a second to think, oh, I shouldn't jump in and save this child because it'll ruin my $2,500 outfit. And yet, that is what we are doing every day when there are people starving, when there are people who are drinking dirty water, when there are people who don't have access to basic medical needs in all over the world. I mean, even right now, there are 700 million people do not have access to clean drinking water. 700 million around the world. Now, that number's a lot lower than it was 20 years ago, which is progress, which is great. But the fact that we're about to fly to Mars and set up a colony there, and yet we still don't have people who can get access to clean drinking water on planet Earth, I mean, that's a little bit off about our system there. And so you have the power to change that. You can jump in and you can save that drowning child.
Spencer, let's start getting into some of the tactical, because for good or bad, the FI community does like to be efficient and get the most bang for buck, or make the most impact with their money. And we can do that in multiple ways. Luckily, especially if you're in the US, the government has incentivized charitable giving. Not even talking donor advised funds, but can you walk me through how charitable deductions actually work in terms of reducing taxes?
Yeah. So unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, there's two ways that your taxes can be reduced. So there's the standard deduction. So that's $15,000 in 2025 for if you're filing by yourself, or if you're married filing jointly, you get to use both partners' deduction. So it's $30,000 for a couple that's married filing jointly. And so what that does is, let's say you make $60,000 in a year. Well, straight away, you get to reduce that amount of money that's being taxed. So now, instead of, if you're married filing jointly, you're making $60,000 together. Now you get to reduce that. Now it's $30,000. If you're single and you're making $60,000, you get to reduce it by $15,000. Now you're only being taxed on $45,000. So what that means, though, is that and you have two options. You can either take the standard deduction or you can itemize. And what itemize means is there's a list of things that the IRS has said, that Congress has said, these are deductible expenses when you file your taxes. And one of them is charitable giving. One of them is giving to, they call it a 501c3 organization. That's just the part of the tax code that defines what a charitable organization is, a 501c3 public charity. The problem you can probably pick up there, though, is if you're not donating more than $15,000 as a single person, or $30,000 as an individual person, or you have other deductions such as like mortgage interest, or there's other deductions out there that add up to more than $15,000 or $30,000, it doesn't make sense to itemize, right? You should just take the standard deduction. That's one part of the tax code where if you're a high income earner, you do have an opportunity that if you were generous enough to start donating $20,000 a year, let's say as a single person, to the charity of your choice, you would be able to put that on your taxes. And now all of a sudden, instead of taking the standard deduction of $15,000, you could take the itemized deduction of $20,000, and that's going to reduce your taxes. Now, where that comes into play, I mean, let's just take the extreme example, right? Let's say you're making $1 million a year and you donate $100,000. You donate 10% of your income to a charitable organization. Instead of taking the standard deduction of $15,000, now you get an itemized deduction of $100,000. Holy cow. And the awesome thing about that is, because of our progressive tax system, that $100,000, instead of being taxed at 39%, is not taxed, right? So essentially, you just, instead of taking 61 cents and giving 39 cents to Uncle Sam, you've now given that full $100,000 to the charitable organization, and they can go use that for whatever purpose that they're set up to do. So that's the real advantage there. And then I'll get into it in just a minute here about how the donor advised fund adds an even greater level of tax savings.
Let me summarize and repeat it back to you just to make sure I understand that correctly. So when we file our taxes every single year, we have one of two options. You can either itemize based on this list, or you can take the standard deduction, which in 2024 was $15,000. Most people, I don't remember the exact number, but I remember reading it. It's like 90 or 95% of people take the standard deduction. So if you're at a point where you're not going to be donating more than $15,000, or at least you don't have based on that itemized list, the mortgage insurance and all, or the mortgage interest and et cetera, you're probably taking the standard deduction. Therefore, you're not going to get any tax break for your charitable giving. I think that's where we're at right now. So we're kind of stuck where we're like, okay, if I'm not making millions of dollars and looking to donate tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars to charity, charitable giving from a tax advantage standpoint is kind of irrelevant to me. But I think we can now introduce the concept of donor advised funds. That might somewhat circumvent some of this issue, or you can take advantage and be optimal with your donations by opening up a donor advised fund. So someone that's brand new to the concept, can you kind of explain what a donor advised fund is and why it might be better for someone to choose using a donor advised fund simply, or rather than just simply writing a check to a nonprofit?
Yep. So a donor advised fund is a giving account that's established at a public charity. So it's an investment account that is managed by a charitable organization, a 501c3 public charity, but you control how the money is invested in that account and how the grants are distributed from that account. So how does this work in practicality? How does this work in the real world? So all the major financial brokerage companies, so Schwab, Vanguard, Fidelity, they all have separate companies, separate 501c3 companies that manage donor advised funds. So they are a 501c3 organization that manages the money in the accounts, but you get to decide how the money is invested. So let's take an example. You have a Vanguard account, you're investing in your taxable brokerage account over there, and you would also open up a Vanguard charitable account, and you could have a donor advised fund there. You could then donate, let's say $10,000 to your donor advised fund, and you could take, let's say there's an organization or your church, you want to send $1,000 a year, you could set up automatic contributions. Hey, every month, send $100 to my church. You could do a one-off, hey, send $1,000 to my favorite charity, Charity Water. Or you could say, you know what, I'm not quite ready to donate now because I want to donate when I can move the needle a little bit more. And so you could just invest the money in an S&P 500 fund or in a money market fund or in a bond fund. There's a lot of times these organizations have 40 or 50, I think DAFI, which is the Donor Advised Fund for You, DAFFY, they have a custom portfolio. So they have like thousands of different portfolios that you can make. So while you're investing for financial independence, while you're saving and investing for financial independence, you could be giving to a donor advised fund that is invested in a similar portfolio to what you have, or could be invested in it could also just be in certificates of deposit, and it's just growing at 3 or 4% a year. Okay, so why would you do this, right? So that's the question. Well, there's a couple big needle movers here that mostly come into effect when you have higher income. The first one is you can have a double tax benefit. What do I mean by the double tax benefit? So let's say you have that Vanguard taxable brokerage account and you have a Vanguard charitable donor advised fund. In your Vanguard brokerage account, you have, let's say, shares of VTI, the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund. And let's say that there's capital gains on them. Let's say it's $100,000. You're looking to make a $100,000 donation to a charity. Rather than donating $100,000 cash to the charity or to your donor advised fund, you can donate your appreciated shares to your donor advised fund. Okay, why would you do that? The reason you would do that is because in the tax code, there's a provision that when you donate shares to a charity or to a donor advised fund, you don't have to pay the capital gains tax on those shares. And oh, by the way, we'll take our example of you make $1 million a year. I'm making it extreme just so that the math is easy. But let's say you have $100,000 cash there that you want to donate to a charity. Instead of donating the cash, you can just donate your shares to your donor advised fund, take your $100,000, put it into your taxable brokerage, and repurchase those shares at the current price. Now you've stepped up your basis. So you've eliminated those $20,000 of capital gains. You've got $100,000 in your donor advised fund. You get to itemize that on your taxes as well. So you haven't paid the capital gains tax on the shares, and you get to deduct it on your taxes. So that's one of the huge tax benefits right there of a donor advised fund. Now, could you donate the appreciated shares directly to a charity? Yes, you could. However, a lot of charities smaller charities especially, are not set up to receive shares like that. And so I always like adding the extra additional step of just having the donor advised fund. And there's two other reasons that I really like the donor advised fund. One, the donations can grow tax free. So let's say you put $10,000 in there. All the growth that happens inside that account is in a 501c3 charity. And so it's not your money anymore, and it's not taxable, right? So you could leave it in there for 10 years, let it double, and then donate it. It's all tax free. And then the last reason I love the donor advised fund is simplicity and privacy. Instead of, you've got the World Wildlife Foundation, you've got the Red Cross, you've got United Way, you've got all these charities coming after you for your money. You could just say, I donate out of my donor advised fund, and thank you for your request. I'll consider it. And then when you make the donation out of the donor advised fund, you can select which level of credit you want, essentially. So you can donate completely anonymously. You can donate and say, this money came from a Vanguard DAF. You can say this money came from a donor advised fund named this, because that's the other fun part, is you get to name your donor advised fund. Or you could say, hey, this came from this donor advised fund. These are the people who own it. This is our address. This is our email address. This is our phone number. And please feel free to contact us if you need anything, right? So you can essentially, you decide the level of future contact you want with the organization. And then the simplicity part of it is, so you've got all these charities asking you for donations. Well, if you donate to each of them individually, you're going to have to save those receipts and save that paperwork. Whereas if you just donate to your donor advised fund, it's one place that you need to keep track of the receipts. So I think that's the real advantage when you're on your journey to financial independence, and you're coming up and you're not making moves with $10,000 or $100,000, but we're just talking about like $10 or $100. If you have a type of account like Daffy, where you can make a small contribution, once a month or once a week, a couple times a year, then if you are lucky enough to itemize, there's just one place that you need to go keep track of your receipts. And if you're not itemizing, then you don't really need to keep track of your receipts anyways.
All right, Spencer, let's unpack a couple of things there. I want to run a few things back because you gave us a whole lot of great information. So first things first, donor advised fund, just another account. Think about it in your suite or your arsenal, just like your taxable brokerage account, your IRA, your 401k, your TSP. This is just another account. One major difference is, though, once you donate to your donor advised fund, you no longer own those
Correct.
funds. You can't transfer the money out of your donor advised fund and back into your taxable brokerage account. So I think that's kind of key. Like, you're making a permanent decision, at least in the sense of you're giving it away, and now this charitable organization owns that money, although you direct how that money is used, which is cool. I like the thoughts around simplicity and privacy. I hadn't given a whole lot of thought to that yet. The privacy, of course, and a lot of people that donate a lot of money do enjoy the privacy, but the simplicity of the tax receipts, but also the simplicity of the receiving of that from a 501c3. Like, I have an organization I'm very passionate about. She is a small nonprofit, and donating crypto or
Right.
appreciated stock is got to be a challenge. But the donor advised fund, or at least many of them, will convert that to cash and send that cash to them, making it much easier on the nonprofit. The thing I really want to talk about, though, is kind of this tax optimization aspect of it. And it almost feels icky, I think, a little bit, like talking about optimization around charitable giving. But here we are. And honestly, when you think about it, you can make even more of an impact because some of the tax structure that's set up for you to be charitable. So you mentioned that you can donate appreciated stock, which is just awesome. Many of us that have been on the path to 5 might have 10, 15 years worth of a appreciated asset that we bought at $100 and now it's worth $1,000. Right. And eventually there could be a tax bomb that's coming on that, especially in our taxable brokerage accounts or our traditional accounts. It's great. You can hand that over to a donor advised fund, avoid Uncle Sam, and give even more to charity versus taking that out of your taxable brokerage account, getting charged the capital gains on it, and then turning around and donating that money to a charity. You can just donate all of it plus the taxes you were going to pay straight to that organization, which I think is a very powerful method for or reason why to use a donor advised fund.
That's something that you can do when you're on the journey to financial independence. You don't need to wait until you're making huge donations. Let's say that you want to just put $100 or $500, right? And you go and you're like, you could go into your Vanguard taxable account or your Schwab or Fidelity, and you could say, okay, I've got, I want to donate 2 shares of VTI, the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund. And one thing that's critical here is you probably want to donate your oldest or your most long-term appreciated shares. And because if you don't, then you only get to deduct the cost basis if it's a short term. So, but let's say then 2010, you had bought 2 shares of VTI at, $80 and now it's $260, right? Well, you could just donate $500 cash to your donor advised fund, or you could donate those 2 shares. Now you just wiped out those capital gains. You had the $500 cash sitting there. You buy another 2 shares of VTI. You've just stepped up your basis, and you can just continuously do this if you're charitably minded. That's the critical thing, right? Like this isn't some crazy.
It's not like a hack.
Tax avoidance hack. Like you now have given up control of that money. That money is going to a charity eventually. And in fact, like a donor advised fund is technically a 501c3 charity. Like it's already there. So like you'll never see that money again, but you get to decide where that money goes and you get to skip paying the capital gains tax. And you can continuously do this in such a way where you're stepping up the basis of your taxable brokerage account, which is great, right? That's one way to skip paying the long-term capital gains and support the organizations that you love.
Yeah, and then there's this interesting concept around preloading a donor advised fund, especially during a high income year. So there's this like group of people that are maybe on the precipice of itemizing their taxes. They're probably not quite there. Maybe they don't own a home and they don't really have enough to itemize year over year. But people can use a donor advised fund. Think about how much am I going to give away in the next 5 or 10 years. And it could be interesting. Like if you make $50,000 a year and you want to give away 10% of your income, you're going to give away $5,000 every single year. Probably not enough for you to itemize your taxes and to get that charitable donation benefit. But you can stack this and donate to a donor advised fund all at one time. Can you kind of break down the math behind this and how you can take advantage of preloading a DAF?
Yeah. So like, let's say you own a small business or something, right? And you go to sell that small business, or let's say you just have a really good year. You're in sales and you make big commissions in one year, but you're not sure that you're going to make it in future years. Like you said, you're front loading it. So let's say that you have a year where you're making, $100,000 or $200,000 more than you would normally make. Rather than saying, okay, we're only going to donate 10% of that, you can say, well, I don't want 32% of that to go to Uncle Sam. So why shouldn't I just, actually, you see this in the military a lot too, where we can get bonuses. There's pilot bonuses where it can be $100,000, $150,000, $200,000 in a single year. And if you're already in the 22 or 24% tax bracket and it's bumping you up to a higher tax bracket, you might say, look, I don't want a quarter of this going to Uncle Sam if I can avoid it. So I'll donate a quarter of it, half of it, however much you're comfortable with, to your donor advised fund, and say, okay, now that's kind of my like charitable bucket. So for the next, like you said, 5 or 10 years, maybe your pay is a little bit lower, but you have this nice donor advised fund chunk of change that's invested and is growing, and you can give to the organizations, to your church, out of that pile of money. And maybe you're not setting aside 10% of your income during those 5 years because you front loaded it, but you still have the power, the capability of donating during that next 5-year period.
Yeah, it's nice because if you're going to donate $5,000 over every year over the next 5 years, put it all into your donor advised fund in 1 year, you get the $25,000. You can itemize that now. and take advantage of the extra 10,000, the delta between the itemized and the standard deduction. And then the following 4 years, default back to standard deduction, and that's okay. So you get some of the advantage in all of that.
And again, you could donate appreciated stock, right? So just because you made the money in cash doesn't mean that you have to make the donation in cash. If you have appreciated shares, donate those. You'll skip the you'll get the double tax benefit. You'll skip the capital gains. You'll get to take the itemization on your tax return, and then you can repurchase those shares with your cash and step up that basis. So it's a great way for high income earners, Henrys, or people who are well on their fat fire journey to support the organizations that they want in a very tax efficient way. I mean, this is like, when I first discovered this, I'm like, why aren't more people talking about this? And the reason is this probably only benefits, maybe 10% of the population, right? And of that 10%, how many are giving in a meaningful way? Unfortunately, like not that many, right? But I think this is one of like the coolest parts of, if I can say that with a straight face, one of the coolest parts of the US tax code, where you get to have your lunch and eat it too.
No doubt. Yeah, it could be interesting for the FI community too. I'm wondering if it could be paired with like a Roth conversion year, like a big Roth conversion year, or even like a final year before you go semi-retired or full retired. It might just be, you might have an opportunity year here in the near future that it makes sense to fully fund a donor advised fund over the next decade and, take advantage of that tax savings now. But let's keep transitioning and now talk through, we set up this donor advised fund. We got it. We're going to take advantage of the tax advantage of it. Where do I go? Like, do you have a platform or provider that you feel like is easiest for first time users? If I'm out there, especially, the FI community, we're fairly DIY.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people access donor advised funds through their financial advisor, but have you set up one on your own? And if so, do you have a preferred platform?
Yeah, absolutely. So the place I would point absolute beginners to is Daffy, DAFFY. It's no money to open.
Which is huge, I think, right? Because a lot of these donor advised funds have like a $25,000 minimum too, which is, I think, outrageous.
Yeah, it is outrageous. And the reason they do that is because, there's administrative costs. So essentially they want to make it worth it, right? That's, I think Schwab and Fidelity have both dropped their minimums to $0, but Vanguard is still $25,000, which in my mind was kind of like a benchmark, like a goal. It was like, okay, if Vanguard says I need at least 25K to open a DAF, like I'll wait until I'm at that kind of level. But now that Daffy has come around and is really shaking up the donor advised fund space and making it available to everyone, I don't see a reason why you wouldn't open up a Daffy account. And here's the other thing too, is you can make transfers between donor advised funds and there's no tax implication, right? Because it's one 501c3 donating to another 501c3. So you could, and I've done this too, where I have donated to my Vanguard charitable, and then I've just sent money to my Daffy account, and then I've sent money on to, a different charity that I wanted to support on my Daffy account. Now, you don't have to do that. I mean, that's complicating things a little bit, but really what I was just trying to do is I was trying to experience the Daffy platform, and I'm really impressed with it. I mean, it's excellent. It's low cost. That's the other thing too, is if you look at the investment expense ratio on Fidelity, Schwab, Vanguard, they're all pretty high, like 0.5.
It's like 60 basis point, right?
50 or 60 basis points. If you look at Daffy though, they're charging, I think it's $3 a month. So it's $36 a year. And and you can invest in VTI at 0.05 or 5 or 4 or 3 basis points. So yes, for the bogleheads, for the FI community that's obsessed with expense ratios, and for good reason too, I think Daffy is a great platform. I think it's the perfect place to start for most people to learn about how to use a DAF, to start seeing, okay, what does it look like when I donate appreciated shares? Like, what's kind of just the workflow of, I've got my Schwab taxable account. How do I donate to Daffy? How long does it take? If I want to support an organization, do I need like a week or 2 weeks lead time to do that? And it's a very intuitive platform. They've really done a nice job of setting it up. So yeah, that's where I would point most people to, is Daffy. Now, if you're in a higher tax bracket or you're just further along on your financial independence journey, wherever you do most of your investing, whether it's Fidelity, Schwab, Vanguard, they probably have a charitable arm. And the reason I opened up the Vanguard charitable is because it's like 5 clicks. I go on my Vanguard taxable brokerage page, I click on the asset I want to donate. I do, specific IDs so I can look at the tax lots and select the one with the most capital gains. I donate those shares to my donor advised fund, and it all processes within like 3 days. And then the money's there in my Vanguard donor advised fund. And I would say the tech platform that Daffy is running is a lot better, is a lot more intuitive. Like the Vanguard has a lot of work to do to catch up, but it's good, right? Now there's competition in this space. And so I'm really excited to see kind of how everybody catches up and makes it a better customer experience. But at the end of the day, like, you have to remember, like, what is it we're trying to do here, right? We're trying to get money to charities so that they can do good work. So, like, if the platform's a little bit clunky, okay, like, just deal with it. Like, take your tax break, invest your money, donate it to the charities that you want to donate to, and then move on with your life. And the other thing about the expense ratio, too, is, people get hung up on that. But my thing is always, if the expense ratio is starting to impact you, that means you've left the money there for too long. Private foundations, which are kind of, that's like the JP Morgan and the Rockefeller Foundation and the Ford Foundation and stuff, right? These were philanthropic organizations that were set up, the millionaires and billionaires of old. There's a legal requirement that 5% of their assets have to be donated every year, have to go out. They can't stay in the organizations. Donor advised funds don't have that requirement currently, but there is legislation proposed in Congress that's going to institute a rule like that, where a certain percentage of the funds have to be donated every year. Now, if you look at the actual numbers, I think it's National Public Trust, NPT, put out a survey that says that about 25% of the funds in a donor advised funds are donated to a charitable organization every year. That's pretty good, right? That's higher than 5%. So I think we're doing pretty good there. But a lot of people get this idea of like, oh, I'll set up this donor advised fund and I'll pass it on to my children, and it'll create this giving legacy and this charitable foundation that will outlast me. And it's like, okay, great. Yep, that is something you can do. But again, people are hungry, people are thirsty, people are dying from treatable diseases right now. So the fact that you want to create this like beautiful giving legacy, like, that's great, but just remember like who is impacted by that decision. And if you can't find a organization that you believe in, that you support, please come talk to me. A couple other places I forgot to mention when we were talking about effective altruism, givewell.org. So they spend millions of dollars every year researching the most effective charities. And it started basically because they were like private equity or like hedge fund guys, and they had made a bunch of money, and they were like, okay, where should we donate this money? And nobody had done any research to prove like $5,000 of malarial bed nets equals one life saved. So they basically created givewell.org to do the research and figure out what are the most effective charities.
How do they define effective? Because this is, I think, an interesting question to ask now, too, because I think a lot of the pushback some people give to me around charitable giving is like, how do I know this nonprofit is well run and making a real impact? And I actually feel like that's a fair obstacle or something to consider.
Absolutely. Yep. And I think that's why for those people that have that objection, go to givewell.org, start reading their research, reach out to them. They have 44 full-time staff dedicated to researching and finding the most effective charities in the world. So, for instance,
that's badass.
Yeah. So, for instance, they have a couple of their causes are malaria. So, malaria kills 600,000 to 750,000 people every year, and 95% of malarial deaths are in Africa. Vitamin A deficiency, vaccine preventable diseases. So these are like all the causes, some of the causes that they recommend. And so when they talk about like the most efficient charities, they're talking about cost-effective, evidence-backed programs that save or improve lives the most per dollar spent. That's what they are focused on. And they do their own research. They don't just like buy the marketing that's presented. So right now they have 4 charities listed on their site. This one is Malaria Consortium, Malarial Bed Nets, Supplements to Prevent Vitamin A Deficiency, and Cash Incentives for Routine Childhood Vaccinations. I love this one too because it's a little non-intuitive, right? But let's see. It costs $148 to vaccinate an infant, and they estimate a cost effectiveness of for every 4,500 US dollars spent, it saves 1 life. And so this program provides cash transfers to incentivize caregivers to bring babies to clinics for routine childhood vaccinations. So it's paying people this one's in Nigeria, to go to their clinic to get their children vaccines, right? As an economist, I love that, right? Like you're creating this incentive and you're getting people in there and you're like literally saving lives.
Yeah.
So their number 1 right now is seasonal malaria, and they have a preventative drug, and it costs $7 to protect a child from malaria. Now, every child that gets malaria isn't going to die from malaria, right? So they estimate $4,500 per life saved. So if you want to get into the nitty gritty of it, givewell.org, like they have smart people doing hours and hours of research and looking at all the different charities that are available. The other thing I really like about givewell.org is they have a whole section called Our Mistakes. And it's every time that they, like once a year, they go back basically and they look at all the charities they've recommended or all the research they've done. And they say like, look, like we said this, but in actuality, like a year later, the evidence just isn't really there. And so we're not recommending this anymore. And I love that like open and transparency, which you don't find in a lot of organizations. Another organization that I'm going to mention is Charity Water. And what Charity Water does is they build water solutions for people who don't have access to clean water. So in Cambodia, for instance, we've sponsored projects there. They have plenty of water. It's just not clean. They create these biosand filter units where dirty water goes in the top and clean water comes out the bottom. In sub-Saharan Africa, they might not have a lot of water, so they got to drill wells, right? They're always looking for the best local solution to that community. And they have this really interesting 100% model. So what does that mean, 100% model? So for every public dollar that's donated to Charity Water, it goes to a water project. Every single public dollar that goes to Charity Water goes to a water project. Of course, the next question is, well, how do you pay for marketing? How do you pay for overhead? How do you pay the salaries of the people who are managing these projects? There's a separate pool of donors. They call it the well, and they cover all the operating costs of Charity Water. So when you donate, and so we learned about them, and I think I actually heard about them when I was in college in like 2009. But in 2019, we wanted to start upping our giving, and we looked at them, and we looked at the 100% model, and they offer a direct water project sponsorship program. So it usually starts about the $10,000 mark. And what you get to do is you sponsor a water project in a country, and it usually takes about 24 months for these projects to be completed. But at the end of it, you have GPS coordinates, you have photos, and you get to see what community you actually helped with this water project. And so like when you donate $10,000, $10,000 of your $10,000 goes towards that water project. The well members are covering the operating costs and everything. And in fact, not only do they cover the operating costs, if you use a credit card to donate, right, the credit card company is going to take, a 3% fee. So like if you donate $100, they're going to take $97. Charity Water didn't like that. So they cover the credit card fees with the money out of the well operating budget. When I learned about an organization like that was like really radically different than any other charity that I had learned about, I was really excited, and we still support them to this day. And meeting people who are in the Charity Water well and support the operations, it was a bit foreign to us to believe in an organization so strongly that you're not even supporting their work anymore, but you're supporting the back end. But in fact, now that's how we like to give, is when we give to charities, we say, we want this going to supporting wherever you need the money. It shouldn't be that just because you work in a charitable organization, like you're living, hand to mouth. Like, why do we reward people for going to work at Facebook and, SpaceX with millions of dollars, but people who are doing like the most good in the world are supposed to be poor and destitute for some reason? Like, people get really hung up on overhead in charitable giving.
I think that's challenging because a lot of people do look at the effectiveness of $1 and what percent of this dollar goes to directly funding the impact that they're trying to make. And that is challenging. And you're right, like from a talent standpoint, it's very hard for nonprofits to recruit because they have to be very effective with their overhead cost. And that usually means paying people under what a normal salary would be. Whereas Facebook and Google and all these other big tech companies, they don't have that issue. And they can throw up 6 or 7 figure salaries to people to attract them. And it's just hard that nonprofits can't do the same. Charity Water is so interesting. It's actually the second time it's come up on the podcast, way back on, I believe, like episode 16, Brendan Kumasari. It's his favorite charity to donate to as well. And I think he is part of the group that funds the operation side of that charity. You're actually doing some amazing things too. I guess you don't run a 501c3, but you're supporting a ton of amazing people. Tell me a little bit about Military Money Manual and who that podcast, that brand, that site, that content is really for.
Yeah, as much as I love to talk about donor advised funds, it's not my usual shtick. We've got the militarymoneymanual.com. So really it started as documenting my journey to financial independence while I served in the U.S. military. So I did 12 years active duty, flew C-17s for the U.S. Air Force all over the world, deployed 3 times, went to 70 countries, dozens, hundreds of TDYs around the world. And it was amazing. It was incredible. Made some great friends, made some good money, and wanted to share how I invested that money and eventually turned it into a book. So on Amazon or on the website, you can purchase the Military Money Manual. It's basically the book that I wish I had had when I started in the military. It's the exact game plan you need to follow if you want to become financially independent in the military. It worked for me. It's worked for hundreds of people. I've gotten lots of great feedback on it. And then we've got the podcast as well. Again, very creatively called the Military Money Manual Podcast, and the Instagram at Military Money Manual.
But once again, everybody, this is Spencer Reese from Military Money Manual. You can check them out online, on your favorite podcast player, or on social media. Spencer, this was a blast, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. Love it.
I really enjoyed that thoughtful discussion with Spencer. Over the years, I've sporadically donated to organizations or supported friends' causes, but wasn't intentional until last year. It was the first year that I put giving in my budget and donated to a few causes I was really passionate about. Before last year, transparently, I just wasn't prioritizing giving. Mostly because I felt like every extra dollar needed to go towards reaching financial independence, and I was kind of too much of a tightwad to funnel money anywhere else. But looking back, I kind of wish I'd given more. I think one of the areas of the conversation that I disagreed with Spencer on was the fact that no gift was too small. You shouldn't be hesitant to give based on the amount that you're comfortable contributing. If you only want to contribute $20 this year to giving, that's totally okay, and you should be proud of it. I think this is helpful because first, it's great to just start practicing the habit of giving. It's not going to be easy at first. Many of us know this through spending. Like, we have all probably struggled to spend our money in some kind of way. We've been saving for so long and conditioned to scrutinize every purchase that when it comes to spending our money, it doesn't come natural. So donating small amounts of money early in your FI journey will help you get comfortable donating larger amounts later on. Second, what you think might be a small contribution might mean the world to a nonprofit. I've been volunteering with and supporting an organization called Be Present for 6 years now. Their mission is to improve the experience both for young adult cancer patients and the communities that support them. I love their mission and the steps that they've been taking to improve this experience. I reached out to Abby, one of the founding members of this organization, about monetary donations and if it's even worth the effort to process a small gift like $25. And I really pushed her on this. I'm like, yeah, like any gift is a good gift, etc. But like, really? And she wrote me back and had a couple of things that I thought were worth reading here today. And she said that, I know it sounds trivial to say no gift is too small, but it's true. There's no such thing as insignificant when it comes to compassion and showing up for others in need. Even the smallest contributions become powerful. A $1 or $2 donation helps us print support guides, patient empathy cards, and notebooks to be included in our support starter kits. I just love the fact that my $2 donation would impact the experience of at least one young adult with cancer and the community that supports them. That's like super heartwarming and a reminder that, once again, no donation is too small. Abby and I then ended up having a conversation about donating time and skills, which I actually thought would be a great alternative and potentially even more impactful for organizations, especially if you feel like you're just not at a place in your financial journey to be able to monetarily give support to organizations. Abby came back and she said, even if they don't have any money to give, their time and talents are also resources of value that they can consider giving. Sharing their intrinsic gifts, whether that's design, writing, storytelling, or advocacy, can ripple far beyond what they expect. Then she goes on to say that 1 hour of volunteer time might mean assembling a support kit or writing a note to a patient's or writing a note for a patient's holiday card. Those perceived small acts of kindness have a big impact. Whether it's brightening someone's day or helping reduce the sense of isolation, the impact is helping a community member. I hope this conversation gave you some inspiration and insight into how you can make an impact. And if you're wanting to make an impact with your dollars, then let's just do what we do best and get the most value from our money using some of the tactics that we discussed today. Like, we are so good at this optimization and tactical stuff that I know in the future I'll be able to support organizations at even a larger scale because I know some of the things like donor advised funds or how to reduce my taxes through some of this tactical donations. So it's super cool. I was really jazzed about this topic. I thought it was a really nice blend between the tactical stuff if you are ready to give, but also the philosophical stuff. Like, if you're not quite there yet or kind of thinking through where does giving fit into my financial plan and my financial goals. And speaking of that, what are the organizations that you are continuing to support right now? What are like some of the causes that you care the most about? Do you have any tips for how you optimize your charitable donations? I'd love to hear them. Send me an email at justin@fiminded.com. Those emails always make my day, so continue to send those along. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Until then, take care.